Good evening, everybody. Our top stories. The Trump wave is rising. 35 candidates have been endorsed by President Trump, and they've won so far this year. We're just getting started.
I'd like to thank President Trump.
President Trump, if you're listening, thank you. I'm looking forward to making sure that we can serve all Americans.
Republican strategist Ed Rollins, New York Post columnist Michael Goodwin are here tonight to break down the Trump effect on the midterm elections. Also, the socialist revolution that the Dems, the desperate Dems, have been depending upon seems to be fizzling before it really ever began. 4 of the 6 candidates favored by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went down in flames. Maybe it has something to do with some left-wing loopy ideas.
Unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs.
We're going to flip this seat red in November.
We gave the military a $700 billion budget increase, which they didn't even ask for.
And the largest wildfires in California history, getting larger by the day. Authorities say the dry, sweltering summer is undermining all efforts to bring those fires under control. We'll have the update for you and the extraordinary video here tonight. Our top story, desperate Dems and the left-wing national media taking a big night for candidates backed by President Trump and trying to spin it as best they could as a win for Democrats. Listen to DNC Chair Tom Perez trying to turn devastating losses, particularly in Ohio's 12th congressional district, into some sort of extraordinary symbolic victory.
This gives me optimism, not only about this seat, but about other House seats, the U.S. Senate, and governor's races.
Wow, Perez almost a cheerleader there. And here's the national left-wing media trying to make the Ohio race a bellwether for the entire nation.
If you're the Democrats, you're thinking we already won tonight. Now, that doesn't mean you do want to win the district. That's what you want. But the fact that this is so close is amazing.
This is a party, the Republican Party, that's becoming more and more every day a rural party.
It was obviously not a good night last night for the Republicans. It seems like the conservative movement, to say nothing of the Republican Party, is pretty deflated.
This is why Democrats, I think, are now heavy favorites to take control of the House. They have a night like this, like they did in Ohio, they could win 40 to 60 seats.
Yeah, I don't know why he would stop at 60. My goodness. Those folks you all listen to were so exactly spot on in calling the 2016 presidential race. No wonder they are so quick to analyze and to conclude and project how it's going to go in the midterms. Their weak efforts to claim a moral victory of some sort coming in the path of the president's celebratory tweet this morning. President Trump said this: 5 for 5. That's right. That's all he said. 5 for 5. And the 5 the president referred to: Republican nominee for Michigan Governor Bill Schuett, Republican nominee for Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, and Republican nominee for Senator from Michigan John James, and clubhouse leaders in Ohio, Republican congressional candidate Troy Balderson, and in Kansas, Governor candidate Chris Kobach. And with all of the success, the president looking geared up for more wins in November, he tweeted this earlier, quote, "As long as I campaign and or support Senate and House candidates within reason, they will win. I love the people, and they certainly seem to like the job I'm doing. If I find the time in between China, Iran, the economy, and much more, which I must, we will have a giant red wave." Well, the water is definitely rising, and it is not a blue wave by any stretch of the imagination. Joining us tonight, Ed Rollins, former Reagan White House political director, Great America PAC chairman, political strategist without peer, Fox Business political analyst, and Michael Goodwin, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, Fox Business contributor, columnist for the august New York Post. Well, gentlemen, you had quite a night, calling it right down the line. Ed, let's start with you. 5 for 5.
5 for 5 is a good night, and the bottom line here is, when you have a special election like this in August, voters who turn out are the ones that win. And our side turned out, and there's another election in November. And the argument the Democrats are making is that we're going to lose in November because people are going to turn out in bigger numbers is all BS. It's just the president went out and endorsed some candidates. He picked a team that he wants as his players, and they're all going to be supportive of him, and they all won, and he turned the people on to go out and vote. He clearly made a difference in Ohio, clearly made a difference in Kansas.
And you called it exactly in Ohio. I mean, this is extraordinary to see. Definitely a close race, sure. But the Democrats already had Ohio, the 12th district, in their blue wave stratagem. If it's a stratagem, it's just a claim, which has fizzled to this point.
I think the key going forward, of course, is for the RNC and the various campaign committees to work more closely with the White House. I think that the president does make a difference, but you've got some of these candidates who are not, I think, forcefully on board with the president. We're talking earlier about Paul Ryan and his sort of holding his nose around Trump. I think there's still too much of that going on among these candidates. When the president is with you, and 90% of the Republicans are with you, you better be with the president if you want to get elected on the GOP line.
You went there very early, but we're going to talk about Paul Ryan. Jason Chaffetz will be with us here later. He's always excited when I talk about Paul Ryan. But the New York Times interview that he gave, if there was any doubt in the minds of anyone in the Republican Party about what a fatuous, shallow, delusional speaker he has been, that should have alone dispelled it.
Well, this was his farewell interview. Whether he thinks he's going to get another big interview with the New York Times or not is irrelevant. This, as far as I'm concerned, is the farewell. And what he basically said in the piece is, I saved the country from Donald Trump. He didn't say, I helped Donald Trump get a tax bill through, or Donald Trump got a tax bill for me, which certainly may happen. It was just...
Well, what happened is that Donald Trump drove and led the Republican Party's tax cut legislation, period.
And will continue to do so. The thing that I think that bothers me the most as someone that's run the congressional committee is what have you. The candidates aren't out there, and the incumbents are not wrapping themselves around Donald Trump and arguing Donald Trump's program, and they better do that or they're going to lose.
Yeah. To your point, and Ed has been talking about this for months now, the Republican Party has one choice if they wish to win. It's a choice that Paul Ryan hates, because this man would rather see the party go into disaster, to go off a cliff, than to embrace President Trump's agenda and his presidency. But they've got to do exactly that. His contract to make America great in their hands will make all the difference in the results, the outcome on November 6th.
Well, a writer named Henry Olson in a publication called American Greatness has a fascinating piece about the voters who switched from Obama to Trump. They are the key to these elections. It's not so much the Republican base as it is those Obama voters who came over because of Trump. That's why he won those blue states. That's why he flipped those 6 states. And if the Republican candidates across the country, if they go against that agenda, then they are not going to pick up those voters in their districts.
Right now, would you say, Ed, that this midterm election, going against history, everything else, is right now looking more like a blue wave, or is it looking like the Republican Party, it's their midterm to lose?
It's their midterm to lose. It has been for months and months and months. And there's the idea that you've got a president who's popular, 50%. You have an economy that's booming, and you're basically struggling. And the only reason you're struggling is because you're running lousy campaigns. And yesterday was a monumental day. Those 5 candidates you put up there are extraordinary candidates. We have an African-American former Iraq war veteran who's going to run in Michigan for who is running, who's now the nominee. That's an extraordinary, that's something unique in the Republican Party that we've never had before. And I just think Donald Trump is going to make a big, big difference.
Yeah,
already has, but he's going to.
I think that what is great, frankly, is that these candidates, irrespective of their religion, their race, these are Americans, and they are Trump candidates. These are candidates who have aligned themselves, irrespective of background and circumstance. They are ready to represent their state, their district, their whatever the race they're in, to work with President Trump. Look, the Ryans and the McConnells have to face this. They might as well mop their brows with the dead hand of the past as continue in the direction they are. This is President Trump's party. It is President Trump's era. And everyone else, from the witch hunt led by Bob Mueller to the rhinos who are trying to undercut him, and the deep states who are trying to subvert the deep state that is trying to subvert the presidency, they're done. They're on the wrong side of history.
Well, and as we saw with these, when the president goes into a state and then backs a candidate, that candidate benefits. Now, it may not be enough on all cases, but the benefit is clear. So the president can motivate voters better than anybody else in the party. And for anybody in the party to resist that is just foolish.
And the epitome was sending Bob Dole out after Trump had gone in and endorsed him. Bob Dole, a man I have a lot of respect for, but is my generation or beyond. Send him in to try and counter the Trump endorsement was just a foolish effort and shows you how far out of touch they are with the American public.
And by the way, there's not a single one talking about Paul Ryan and his contribution to the results in these elections because he hasn't made any. Right. They're even making really dumb decisions about what they're doing with campaign money and the candidates that they're supporting. It is a disaster for this Republican Party if they don't get the speaker, this lame duck, out of that speakership and move straight ahead. This is Trump's party.
Well, can I just say quickly, too, I mean, some of these Democratic candidates are saying they will not support Nancy Pelosi for speaker. Republicans need to have a speaker they can support on the campaign trail.
Well, I actually am supporting Nancy Pelosi for minority leader in perpetuity. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Michael. Thank you, Ed.
See you.
Up next, a rough night of primaries for the socialists, despite Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls for, something. We don't know what to put it. We need a name. Call it a socialist revolution.
Something is happening in this nation. Something is happening in this country, and we can embrace it. We can win on it.
I don't know what it is. I'm calling it a socialist revolution. It's happening? Wow. Deep. Well, apparently they can't win, though. We'll take that up and more. Jason Chaffetz joins us here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
This program is brought to you by Progressive.
The desperate Dems and their so-called socialist revolution and their new face of the party went basically nowhere in the primaries yesterday. 4 of the 6 candidates endorsed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lost and lost badly. Cortez adding, I guess you could call it insult to injury or just insult and injury, going after a key group of voters that Dems desperately need if they want to do anything in November.
I think that politically, this upper middle class is probably more moderate. Mm-hmm. But that upper middle class doesn't exist anymore in America. Their heyday was in the 90s when kids had Furbies and parents, you had soccer moms with 2 vans and stuff
Furbies and 2 vans.
Yeah.
That's a dream.
That's not America anymore.
Wow. You can see why the Dems want to put her out front. And the Republicans seem to be applauding the decision. Here to discuss, Jason Chaffetz, former Republican congressman from Utah, Fox Business contributor, author of the soon-to-be-published book, The Deep State, How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda. It's now available for pre-order on Amazon and everywhere. Just tell them you want it and get on the list. Great to have you here, Jason.
Thanks.
Congratulations. We can't wait to see the book. And it's great to see you. And by the way, your beautiful family in the green room.
Yeah, my wife, our daughter, a granddaughter.
Oh, yeah.
And our son-in-law.
And just he appreciates the add-on. But what a wonderful family. And
Thank you.
It's great to meet them. Let's turn to politics. The idea that Ocasio-Cortez is suddenly the face of the Democratic Party. How excited should that make every Republican in the country?
Well, what the liberal Democrats are trying to sell, America's not buying. I think what she said about middle America is some of the most offensive things out there. And that's been the tactic of the left, right? It's about scorched earth. It's about the resistance movement. And it's about dividing America. It's not about giving them a positive economic message. And that's why Donald Trump is so successful and somebody like Ocasio-Cortez is failing.
Yeah, and Chuck Schumer has suddenly disappeared. We're not hearing much from Nancy Pelosi. We are hearing nothing from Paul Ryan either. The lame duck fraud that he is. No one is mentioning his name in the midst of these primaries, historic primaries, but they are talking about thank you, Mr. Trump. Because he's the difference maker.
Yeah, look, Donald Trump is the leader of the party. And as you rightly pointed out just a few moments ago, if you don't embrace the Trump agenda, you're going to pay the price in November. I know that the people who waffle on the president and the president's agenda are going to be the ones that get defeated in November. There is a positive message. It's working. It's working internationally. It's working domestically. It's creating jobs. It's creating wealth. It's creating prosperity for America. And putting America first and protecting our borders.
What an idea. America first. Do you remember when that very slogan was so controversial? No, Mr. President, you can't put America first.
How dare you say that?
You mean put us first? Are the American people, workers, families? You mean you want the middle class to grow, not to continue to shrink? And here we are.
When Republicans try to apologize and make excuses and say, well, we didn't say it exactly the way the left-wing media wanted us to say it, that's when you get yourself into trouble. Be simple with your message and just follow the president's lead.
And be honest.
Yes.
It's so simple, so straightforward, as you say. Yeah. And to see the president going, right now, his most recent endorsements, 18 of them, he's 19 of them, he is 19 and 1 this year.
I think one of the most exciting things from last night with John James out of Michigan, that's now a seat that I think is definitely in play because a Michigan Senate seat that's been held by the Democrats for a long time, we're talking about moving into Republican hands, and that candidate, that man, with his background, is something really exciting to be about.
Well, I'm excited about him. I'm excited about all of the people who won and Chris Kobach, for example, the Secretary of State running for governor in Kansas. It's a tight race, but he's in the lead. You know what? I've known Kobach for a very long time. He is an upfront, straight-up guy, honest and fearless. But for him as Secretary of State, it will be his job to do the count of provisional ballots. And they asked him to recuse himself, and he told them, now this is my language, not his, but the effect was, go to hell. Thank you very much. I want to be sure that this is a fair and honest count, and he will do that.
It's going to be real simple. You take each of the counties and you tally them up, and I like that he just stood tall. And he's taking on an incumbent.
Right.
But you've seen the power of a president, because you normally take on an incumbent in your own party. That usually is not a formula for success.
Our last question, as usual, it's your fault that we've gone over. Do you believe that the president will make the final difference in the outcome in November, and will the Republicans have the ability to not only hold the House, but perhaps improve a few seats?
I do. I do think he makes the difference because he's making the country, he's putting it back on track. And the people that waffle on the president and the president's agenda, those will be the losers that we see in the loser bracket. And hopefully that more of them embrace it than shun it and don't step away from what the president's doing.
All right. Jason Chaffetz.
Thanks, Lou.
Great to have you here. And remember, his book, available for pre-order everywhere. The Deep State. I love that. Catchy title, The Deep State. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Lou.
Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. Are you shocked that not a single Republican candidate credited Paul Ryan last night for their election victory? Not a single one. Oh, that's right. They were crediting the President of the United States. Rightly so. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We'd like to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs tonight. Up next, New York Congressman Chris Collins in legal trouble. Insider trading. The feds are worried about the fact that he may have cheated our markets and our justice system. We'll have more when we return right after these words. Stay with us. Oh, they're crying in Hollywood, folks. The Hollywood elites disappointed with the showing of their radical dim candidates in last night's primaries. And they responded by, of course, blaming Russia. Oh, yes, and the unwashed voters. Actress Alyssa Milano tweeted this: because of our unwillingness to pass policy that protects our election integrity, I immediately think the Green Party votes tonight are Russian meddling. Why else would anyone cast a protest vote in Ohio when there's so much at stake? Was that an endorsement of voter ID? Just asking. Patricia Arquette tweeted this. Danny O'Connor, demand a recount if you can. She doesn't even know whether he can or not. And an outside analysis and audit of voting machines. Yes, ma'am. And Deborah Messing tweeted this. This is an embarrassment. Well, an embarrassment it all was. Joining us now, Washington Times opinion editor Charlie Hurt. Charlie, great to have you with us. I mean, do you feel, I can feel the pain of those luminaries in Hollywood, not knowing what the rules are for recounts, not knowing whether or not you can actually audit machines and which are electronic and what they are a hot mess, and they have no problem sharing that with the country.
It's the Russians. It's all the Russians. But I do think it's great. I do think it's marvelous that finally some of these people who have been out on some other planet for the last few decades are finally coming around to understanding that we actually do have enemies in the world. And China, places like China and places like Russia, they are our enemy. And so I'm glad to have them back in the fight with us against the and against the socialists too. I'm glad to have them out there against the socialists. I'm also glad to have all of them up in arms as free marketeers. Welcome to the fight, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and now the question is, will we be better off with them, or will we be better off without them?
Right, exactly.
The idea that the Russians are to blame here, going there instantly. That's Russian meddling, without question, and that rationalizes everything. Ocasio-Cortez obviously is not just a poorly read socialist. She's a floundering socialist. She can't define what is happening, but she says something's happening, but certainly not because of her or for the socialists who they thought would take over the movement here, I guess, in a period of about 90 days.
Yeah, I have to say that one of the truly good things that I think came out of last night is that some of these socialists, the people that were the most enthusiastically supported by Bernie Sanders and Cortez woman, that voters did reject them, because it's a very bad thing in this country if one of our two major main parties is completely taken over by legitimate socialists. That's a terrifying thing, and I think it does underscore another thing. I think Bernie Sanders should have won. He almost won the Democratic nomination, should have won the Democratic nomination. But I think what's clear here is that people weren't actually listening to anything he said. They just liked his style, and they liked that he was a thorn in the side of the establishment Democrat Party.
You are a generous man. You are a generous fellow.
No, because it's a bad thing, Lou. It's a bad thing if an entire party in our country is actually supported by voters and is totally socialist. That is a terrifying thing.
You know what I think is terrible, perhaps even more terrible, is that he didn't almost win. He was defrauded by the party that would have been all socialist. So I think it would have all worked very well, because they obviously have no qualms whatsoever about theft and confiscation. They confiscated his nomination.
Right.
They stole the votes that were necessary and funded the DNC, and people want to just sort of submerge it. Bernie had a bad run of luck.
Yeah.
The hell he did. He was defrauded by his party.
Yeah. What is socialism if it's not theft? Of course, the machine that won was socialist in that regard.
Yeah, and they're close enough to suit me. I don't want to get any closer to the reality. Let's turn very quickly to the president. 5 for 5 last night on his endorsed candidates. He's got a remarkable record that he's built here. It's unprecedented, by the way. We use the word unprecedented. It should almost be affixed to his record on almost anything. But he is really changing politics in this country. The leader of the party making certain that candidates are winning.
Yeah, and then also going into places like Kansas and picking a candidate in that within the primary and saying that I want this candidate, Chris Kobach, who is more in line with me. I want him to be the person that wins this nomination. That's an important thing. But we hear the media talk about this blue wave, and it's going to be this giant blue wave. Maybe so. I don't know. Maybe that maybe they have a crystal ball that none of the rest of us have. But I have to say that losing 8 out of 9 races, 8 out of 9 special elections, that to me is not evidence of a blue wave.
Yeah.
That's an evidence of something else. And I get it that that most of these are in Republican districts, and the races are closer than they should be. And Lord knows Republicans need to be on high alert and ready to fight and fight hard in November. But there's no evidence of a blue wave. So I don't know why they keep talking about it.
Well, I think the president's got it right. Unless they're colorblind, it's pretty clearly to this point a red wave. It's just it's a wonderful thing to watch. Winning, as the president used to say, winning. You're going to get
tired of it. Are you? Are you tired?
Not even close. Not even close. Charlie Hurd, great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lou.
Up next, President Trump's attorneys now say negotiations with Special Counsel Mueller are, quote, nearing the end.
We have now given him an answer. He obviously he should take a few days to consider it, but we should get this resolved. We do not want to run into the November elections. So you back up from that. This should be over with by September 1st.
Well, I don't know about you. I still remember when Rudy Giuliani said it'll be a wrap in a few weeks. We'll take it all up with former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell right after the break. Let's hope that Giuliani is right this time. We'll be right back. Today, sending their response to Robert Mueller about his conditions for an interview with the president. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, saying this, quote, "It's not a refusal, but at the same time, it's not a completely unreasonable position. I can see a way in which Mueller may agree with it." And the prosecution's star witness in the trial of Paul Manafort wrapping up his testimony today. Rick Gates, forced to answer questions about his past infidelity, his embezzlement, and Manafort's instructions for Gates to be truthful with the FBI during a 2014 interview. Joining us tonight, Sidney Powell, former federal prosecutor, author of the book, License to Lie, about the Justice Department and its wayward ways. Good to have you with us, Sidney. Let's start with the Manafort. It's great to have you here. Let's start with the Manafort trial. Rick Gates, your sense as whether the so-called star witness in a what is styled a document trial, prosecution at least, how did he play and did he do his job for the prosecution?
Well, Mr. Gates comes with a lot of baggage. Obviously, he embezzled millions of dollars from Mr. Manafort. Obviously, Mr. Manafort did not know that was going on, or he would have done something about it, which should tell the jury that he doesn't pay very close attention to his finances and the companies that Gates was involved with. We know that Mr. Gates lies, and we know that he made such a sweetheart deal with the government. It's unbelievable. He would get probation in exchange for his testimony. It's very common for Andrew Weissman and others on the task force like this, as I wrote about in my book, License to Lie, to give sweetheart deals to the real, actual criminals. At the same time, they squeeze them to go against people who didn't commit a crime at all. So it's going to be up to the jury here to closely evaluate the evidence and to remember that as jurors, they can do justice. The jury is a product of the Constitution, and an individual juror acting alone, if they maintain a not guilty position on every count, can keep an unjust conviction from happening.
Well, that's a possibility among, as we know, many. The Gates, whether he is testifying about embezzlement, testifying and affirming that he lied, it is difficult to see how the jury would not be influenced by the so-called star witness who lies, who has admitted embezzlement and breaking laws.
Yes, they're certainly going to be influenced by what he said. I just hope they realize the pressure he's under to comply with whatever the prosecution wants him to say. And the fact that they used the tactics of having him say, oh, yes, I committed a crime and I committed crimes here too, those are things for the jury itself to determine. They can't take Gates' word for that at all. And at this point, have you got a sense of how it's going? Which side, the defense or the prosecution, is ahead on points? If I can oversimplify. Well, the prosecution may be a little ahead at this point because the defense has not really started its case. I hope the jury will keep an open mind and again remember that a single juror can stop an unjust conviction, which might be the very message that needs to be sent to Mr. Mueller to stop this witch hunt. And let's turn to Robert Mueller. He's now holding in his hands a letter from the president's attorneys with an offer. The suggestion is that I love really Giuliani's language. It is he has taken a position that is the president's attorneys have taken a position that's not entirely unreasonable. I know what he meant to say, I think, but perhaps there is also truth in what he says. It isn't entirely unreasonable, and that's exactly the way Mueller might respond. What do you think? Well, we are talking about the President of the United States here. I certainly would not advise him to sit down with Mr. Mueller under any circumstances because, frankly, he's already done that. He did it within 48 hours of Mueller being named special counsel when Mueller interviewed as director of the FBI. I still haven't figured out how Mueller goes from interviewing as director of the FBI to special counsel in less than 48 hours to investigate the person who just rejected him as director of the FBI. I want to see the emails and text messages between Rosenstein, Mueller, Comey, Strzok, Page, Rosenstein, all of those people for at least the 2 months prior to Mueller's appointment. I think there's evidence in the Strzok Page text message that Mueller was being kept abreast of the Hillary Clinton email investigation and also the Russia collusion narrative. Well, well-informed he was, and I can't find much about this witch hunt that frankly is an upside-down, illogical, filled with conflicts of interest and illegality. But there you are. It absolutely is. The Department of Justice at its very worst. Sidney Powell, as always, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. Thank you, Lou. After 54 years of production, the 10 millionth Ford Mustang rolled off the production line today at the Flat Rock Assembly Line in Michigan. The Mustang is the best-selling sports car of all time. Now, there's a little beauty. The new Mustang. Up next, President Trump making a bold and ambitious prediction for the red-hot Trump economy. Also tonight, Pennsylvania Republican Senate candidate Congressman Lou Barletta joins me here. He'll be with us next, and we will be back in just a matter of moments. Stay with us. This meeting met last night with top business leaders, including the CEOs of PepsiCo, during his working vacation in Bedminster, New Jersey. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo joining the ranks of the open border radical Dems, calling ICE a politicized police force, vowing to do nothing cooperatively with the agency. He has gone completely radical. This is the very same governor who's on board with the loony left's plan to give voting rights to convicted felons. Most recently, he considered pardons for thousands of convicts now on parole. Joining us tonight, Congressman and Republican Senate candidate Lou Barletta of Pennsylvania. Lou, I've got to make a full disclosure here. We've known each other for years, and I am an unabashed fan of Lou Barletta and a great fan of all that you've done for not only as mayor, but as congressman and for the country. Just extraordinary. Good to have you with us.
Good to talk to you again.
Let's start with, when you watch the president go for 5 on endorsements, as he did yesterday in yesterday's primaries, you must be feeling pretty good about November 6th.
Well, I don't see a blue wave, Lou. What I see is people who are on a desert and think that they see water, When they get there, there's no water. It's a mirage. People vote their pocketbooks. The president's keeping his promises, and they couldn't be happier. He'll win Pennsylvania by a bigger margin in 2020 than he won last time.
And you're working across the state to win the Senate against an establishment figure. And the president has made it pretty clear of what he thinks of Casey. You are going to be campaigning effectively on assuring solidarity with the president, whether it be in the Senate or whether it be just in general policy. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was one of the first to endorse President Trump because I believed in the policies and I believed in the things he was saying. You know, right off the start, he talked about securing the borders, putting an end to illegal immigration, speaking for the forgotten men and women. And this race not only contrasts myself and Bob Casey, who has moved very far left. I mean, he is one of the most liberal senators in Washington, but also one of the leaders of the resistance and obstructionists in Washington against somebody who is supporting the policies that are putting record people back to work.
Isn't it extraordinary that there is that the Dems basically are obstructionists? They are the resistance to policies that have led to record low unemployment for Hispanics, for blacks, who has built an economy that is growing at 4.1%. And the national left-wing media, Lou, they want to forget that 8 years of Barack Obama telling the country they would never see 3% growth again. It is amazing to me how facile and delusional the Democratic National Committee is, the Democratic leadership is. They have no plan.
They've lost total touch with people. They're now being run by people who are so far left, and you know they don't relate to the values of the people in Pennsylvania. I could tell you that, and that's why they're going to be wrong. They were wrong about President Trump in Pennsylvania, that he couldn't win Pennsylvania. They're going to be wrong about our race as well. The people here in Pennsylvania are not disappointed with what Donald Trump is doing as president of the United States. And Bob Casey supports sanctuary cities. That's not Pennsylvania. He's against the tax cuts. He gave us Obamacare that saw our premiums rise 120%. I'm looking forward to debating and campaigning here in Pennsylvania and being a vote in the Senate that keeps this going, keeps our economy going.
Can you imagine that you will have to debate somebody who wants to raise taxes, who wants to support sanctuary cities, who doesn't believe in America first, who doesn't appreciate a president who has changed the mindset of the entire country? I was just saying earlier in the broadcast, do you remember when it was a big deal, the national left-wing media trying to make a big deal out of President Trump's America First policies? And now people accept, we really have a president who is putting this country and Americans first, as it should be.
They feel good about it. They feel good that we finally have a president that is sticking up for them, saying, we're gonna fight for our workers, our jobs, and again, I couldn't be happier to be in a debate and debate those issues.
Well, you're going into this general election with I think a pretty extraordinary statement from the president, just simply calling you a legend. So you got to feel pretty good about that. Congressman.
It was great to help him here in Pennsylvania, and he's back here helping me get into the Senate.
It sounds like a plan to me, Congressman. Great to see you.
Nice to talk to you again.
And Lou, I really like that first name. It really works. I like those signs
I like yours too.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks. Lou Barletta, running for Senate in the great state of Pennsylvania. Still ahead, the next steps in the trial of Paul Manafort. And be sure to catch me on Tucker Carlson tonight, 8 p.m. on the Fox News channel. Best-selling author, radio host Mark Steyn, guest hosting this evening. We'll be there. Please join us. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
For over